All right, guys, welcome back. This is Coach Andrew Simmons from Peak Performance Running. And as you guys can tell, we are trying to get our YouTube channel up and running. And one of the things that I thought would be helpful for you guys, and some of the feedback I've gotten from you guys, both on our Instagram as well as on my personal Instagram, Coach Simmons Runs, is talking about actual race strategy. And trying to put these things onto Instagram is tough because these are conversations. These are things that are a little bit longer form and are actually coaching instead of just little snippets here and there. So we're going to kind of take to some longer form discussions, probably maybe 5 minutes at most. Some may get a little bit longer if we need to get specific, but hopefully this will be helpful for you guys. The number one question I get this time of year, of course, surrounds track racing. The way I work with a lot of my athletes, even though the club scene is pretty much shut down for high school athletes with the exception of some small races, Texas Distance Festival, things like that, is really talking about race strategy, both from a physical perspective, but a mental perspective. And what we're going to talk through today is strategy for the mile. I think when it comes down to it, I really like to think of it as a play in 4 acts. The symmetry of a mile, each 400 really kind of looks a little bit different. When you think through a race or maybe think through a competitive mile race, that first one is all about getting into good position. If you're stuck in the middle of a race, that can be a really tough place to be. And especially if you're stuck on the inside lane 1 in a very crowded championship level race, positioning yourself for a good kick can be hard. But the reality is most races aren't going to be championship level races. So going and looking at collegiate races that aren't championship races, so the ones that aren't always the super exciting big kick at the end type races, is not the greatest research for you to do. I'll encourage you guys to go and look and find some other races and just watch how athletes position themselves and then follow them all the way to a championship level race. So go watch the earlier Cooper Tier, Cole Hocker races or the Yard Nagooses out there and watch how they position themselves. That is probably the most important thing. And then secondly, looking at how do you pace yourself? I think the number one thing I have to work with high school athletes on is understanding how to truly pace themselves for a mile. So we're going to assume, for ladies, we'll talk about the 6-minute barrier. We'll talk about the 5-minute barrier for men. But the reality is that they're all pretty similarly paced. The way that I like to look at these things is, and I'll use kind of a word association for you guys, is the first lap is really about push, which means you're kind of have to get out and be in that group. So push, meaning get into the race, right? If you're either a competitor or you're a player. And what that means is that if you're a competitor, you're going to approach your racing strategy completely differently. This is about understanding who is in the race and who you are competing against. If you are racing against the clock, you are a player. So there are players and competitors in every single race. And depending on how this shakes out, if you are the fastest person in that race, you just got bumped up to competitor status. And your thinking, your awareness, and all of those things start to really get heightened. So the biggest thing you have to think about in lap 1 is both getting out and getting into good position, but also relaxing. You got 3 hard laps ahead of you. If you are not able to take a deep breath, relax, and find your good position and really get into a groove, it's going to get really hard, and it's going to feel too hard by the time you get to the apex of the race. For that second lap, again, it comes down to pace and really finding that groove. You should know now, being a month into training, what your mile pace should feel like. This is a big reason why I encourage a lot of my club athletes to get out there and actually do preseason racing. So all of that indoor racing has a point. It's not to go flex our muscles as a club. It's to actually work on our strategy and make a lot of mistakes and be able to go out and do that every single week or every couple of weeks and test our fitness as it builds. But by now you should know how your mile pace feels. Get to it and try to relax. The best thing that I heard from a good friend of mine, Coach Dalby, and this was actually in a presentation at Jay Johnson's clinic, was talking about how when you're running your fastest, you want to try to relax the most. The more that you can be relaxed running at your mile pace, the better off you're going to be. The more comfortable it's going to feel so that when it does get hard, you can strike. Third lap, this is position. So we talked about position in the first lap, and that's more about getting into the right spot and getting with that front group. But here's the reality, is that even if you're way off the back and everybody's being super aggressive this race, if you can make your way back to that front group in lap 2 or lap 3, you're fine. Just as long as you haven't stressed yourself out too much and you're not over the top. Lap 3 in a truly competitive race, so we're talking about the competitor and not just the player here. The competitor is sizing up the competition and using their ears to actually size up their competition more than their heart and their lungs. They're listening to the competitors. Where's that breathing rate at? Do we hear a lot of dragging in their breathing? Is there a lot of hard breathing there? What's happening around us? If someone in that group takes a nice deep breath and you guys are coming around with about 500 to go, that's the person I'd watch out for. That person's pretty relaxed and they got some fuel in the tank and they're ready to go. If everybody else except you is breathing and they're on their ragged edge, it might be a good time to throw in a little surge and see who goes with you. Now, when it comes to tactics, I could spend a whole nother hour talking to you about how to surge, how to look at your competitors and really kind of play the game that's around you. But the reality is that if you're in good position and in striking position with a lap to go, it's all about figuring out when do you want to make a decisive move. So that last lap, I think for a lot of you that are in the player's position, lap 3 is actually the hardest lap because it's the lap you fall asleep on. It's the one that I was on pace through 800 and then it started to get really hard. And you're already thinking about lap 4 and what's happening at the end of it. So I will encourage you that is out there, that is listening, that is trying to break that 6-minute barrier. Put your focus on lap 3. Lap 4 will happen, but without a good lap 3, you cannot make up 6 seconds in lap 4 unless your fitness is way beyond that 6-minute barrier. So I will tell you this. Do not worry about lap 4, my players, my competitors. If you are sizing up and you're trying to win the race versus beat the clock, worry about lap 4. So let's look at this. Lap 4, mentally, whereas all is what it is. Lap 4 is about mental positivity. So to recap, push, pace, position, and positivity. Those are really the 4 ways that I look at racing a mile. Mental positivity, that game that's happening in your brain, if you're going, my goodness, this is hard, and I'm falling off pace, and I am not going to make this happen. Well, the reality is that if you switch that narrative and go, this is hard, but I can do this. I just have to stay with this pack. I just have to hang on, and I think I will get what I want. You have to play that game and tell yourself that until you cross that finish line. The moment you see the clock and you say, oh man, I'm not going to make it, and you try to do the math in your head, your focus is already in the wrong place. It's already in the wrong space. You have to bring it back and go, just keep going. Put your head down and focus on driving your arms and kicking your legs and moving like hell. So I hope that this was a helpful conversation. I know that keeping these things under 10 minutes is hard for me because I could elaborate on racing strategy. But when it comes down to it, it's a race of 400s. When I get into lap 3, I think about the ABC of running, which is always be closing. I am trying to move up on my competitor in lap 3 so that I can position myself, hopefully, really, really well, and then staying really positive about what's happening, because the reality is that not every race is a chance to PR. But when you go out and you step on that start line, it's a chance to learn, it's a chance to grow, and it's a chance to do something bigger than just beating the time on the clock. It's about saying, can I go out and beat myself and run faster on lap 3 than I did last week and better myself? So let's leave it at that. Otherwise, we're going to go on for 15 minutes or an hour, just like I do on my podcast. So with that said, I hope this was helpful. If you guys enjoyed this or want more things, go ahead and leave those in the comments. If I don't see anything, I'm just going to keep going down the path of talking about the 2 mile and then the 800. So hope this was helpful. I'll see you guys hopefully in another week.